Hello, gorgeous, and welcome to the Women on Top podcast. I'm your host, Valerie Lynn, and with over 15 years of business experience, I became truly passionate about finding ways to support and hear from way more women. And what we know to be true is that women thrive when they are in their favorite position, on top in business, in relationships, in personal growth, and on top in being real and authentic to who the hell they are. So I invite you to sit back and enjoy the Women on Top podcast. Well, welcome back to another fantastic episode of the Women on Top, everybody. And I am so humbled to be sitting alongside of a fantastic expert today. And today's guest is Brooke Boskovich, and she is a MS, RD, LD. She has all of the certifications. She is a fertility dietitian. So not just dietitian, but specifically fertility dietitian, which is actually really why I wanted to bring her on to the show today. And she really finds her passion is to empower women and, couples as well, to uncover some of those barriers that they encounter to conception, and help them take home healthy families and help them along that process. So I'm just really, really grateful that she's taken the time to be here with us today. And I have so many questions for her. So welcome to the show, Brooke. It's such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Valerie. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah. You seem to have a personal approach when I look at all of your content. And it seems that you've also faced some health challenges of your own, and including things like, I think, irregular cycles and even some autoimmune issues. So I'd love it if you could share a little bit of your own journey.
Yeah, I would love to share. It definitely, my own personal health journey led me to what I do and how I help women and couples today. So it's a really big part of just why I do what I do. My symptoms and my personal health journey started when I was a teenager. I had all sorts of cycle issues. I was really just given the pill as the fix all, which, I now know was not the best route to go, but then it was one that I took. I continued to have symptoms, even though I was on the pill. I was having painful cycles. I was getting really sick every time I'd start a new pack of pills. I'd had all sorts of gut issues. And so I was just kind of trying to figure all of that out, really starting as a teenager. When I went off to college, I finally found a naturopathic doctor that helped me do some more appropriate testing and dive a little bit deeper into what might be going on. And I was then diagnosed with celiac disease and Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune condition against the thyroid as well. And those two autoimmune conditions are really common to go together. But that started answering a lot of questions that I had and helping me kind of learn more about where my symptoms were coming from. Unfortunately, at that time, I still wasn't putting together the birth control as being part of that puzzle too. And so I ended up continuing down my health journey, then having the diagnoses, and nutrition being a really big part of what you need to pay attention to, especially for celiac disease initially. I just started learning more and more and going down rabbit holes. I ended up studying nutrition in college because I became so, interested in that for myself. And when I was getting my master's in nutrition is really when I started connecting the dots between the hormone pieces and nutrition. And I started exploring other diagnoses that are very related to nutrition, like PCOS, for instance, that, when we make changes with our nutrition and our lifestyle, we can impact disease progression that has to do with hormones in a lot of ways. And so just little by little, the more I learned and the more schooling I did, what I learned drove what I continued to pursue in school. And I was lucky enough to actually intern with a dietitian who was specializing in women's health. And that opened a
Oh,
lot
wow.
of doors and paths for me. And really eventually led me to getting the additional functional medicine training and specializing in women's health and fertility, all while continuing to go on my own health journey as
Yeah.
well.
I think that's why it's so meaningful to me to have you on, is because you not only are an expert in the field, but you're walking the walk yourself. And so, sometimes I think we just hear so much information. We're all a little on information overload, but it's more meaningful when somebody has actually experienced it. And so I just really appreciate that you have that functional medicine background. You also have the women's health background, and you're coupling that with, of course, the diet as well, and how powerful that is. And although there's so much information out there, there still doesn't seem to be a lot of information or studies done on women's health in general, and putting all of this together. And gosh, it's just so much to sort through. So I'm glad that there's somebody like you who's really focusing on this. And I guess, maybe we can kind of start on, the nutrition piece. And so I know your approach to fertility and nutrition is both kind of like evidence based and also compassionate. And so, what experiences or insights led you to really kind of specialize in this work? And I know you kind of, just shared some of them, but do you have anything else that really helped you, kind of shape the narrative around who you wanted to serve the most and why this was so important to you? Because clearly this is kind of like your legacy that you want to leave. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think just myself, like wishing that I had more information much earlier on in my health journey, and it, because it was so connected with like going through puberty for me, and when all the symptoms kind of hit, and then how they were basically suppressed, if you will, with birth control, is definitely a big part of it. And then after that, I nutrition training or education is largely females that are going through this type of schooling for whatever
Yeah.
reason. Like there are males too, but it's definitely a female dominated field. And so,
Yes.
and we all talk, and there was so many like different cycle problems and issues related to just our monthly cycle. And we didn't know much about, about our cycles, even as like, we're in our early 20s getting our master's degrees. And I was just like, couldn't help but keep thinking like we should know a heck of a lot more about our bodies.
Yeah.
It happens every month, or it should be happening every month in this cycle. And it's like this foreign thing to us that we're basically most often told to just take the pill for, and, worry about everything else and getting pregnant later. And so it just led me to have more curiosity and keep asking more questions. And I had a good girlfriend that was diagnosed with PCOS around that same time. And that really opened, I mean, when I opened my practice, my very first program that I ran was getting pregnant with PCOS, because
Oh, wow.
I was so interested in the women's health and fertility side, and then really like worked alongside my girlfriend in kind of her own health journey as well. And because I noticed so many differences in myself with the nutrition lifestyle changes in my cycle, like PCOS was like a pretty natural place to start, like really
Yeah.
focusing in on. Um, and it was really from there that I realized like PCOS is it's a very common diagnosis. It's really the most common ovulatory disorder in women, but there's so much else connected to that, and learning that just because all of these women have the same diagnosis doesn't mean that they have the same root causes or the same triggers, and the same management is not really going to work for everybody. And that's where I started, delving into more of the unexplained infertility type cases, because it's like, PCOS in a sense can relate to unexplained infertility in a lot of ways, just because every woman is very individualized. And not to go too off in the weeds, but really, like, one thing kind of led to another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love hearing kind of how the pieces fit together. And I've heard of a lot of women who have been diagnosed with PCOS. I don't think I don't know if I have PCOS or not, but I have often suspected potentially I have endometriosis. So, gosh, if you do find out somebody has something like PCOS or endometriosis, that does feel like it's explained. So, on more of a root cause level. So I guess my question is there such thing as unexplained fertility in your mind, or what's your standpoint on that, I should say?
Yeah, I strongly dislike that label of unexplained infertility, because there's always a reason, and it's whether we can find it or not. But I think the conventional approach to getting or arriving at that label is quite narrow-minded. It's very, very much a scratch of the surface when we're thinking about fertility. And the things that they look at are very important. We're looking at the structural, like, reproductive system, making sure tubes are open, making sure, all the parts are there in the right place, that you're producing hormones appropriately, and that you're ovulating, and there's just no concerns with structure or hormones, essentially. But when we think about our body, it's connected. All of our systems are connected. And so if we're just isolating the reproductive system and saying all looks good, I guess we have no idea why you're not getting pregnant. It's like, it's so frustrating to me, because we have to think about fertility as the energy intensive process that it is. So, like, that's really how I think about, like, the very foundational process of fertility is energy. Like, how is your body producing energy, and where is that energy going? And that might seem like oversimplified, but everything that we do on a day-to-day basis requires a lot of energy. And if we are not producing enough energy on top of that, on top of, like, our brain functioning and our heart functioning and our gut functioning, if we don't have enough energy left over to support reproduction, there's going to be barriers. And it can be different for different people. But, like, if we're not looking at that foundation, which the conventional approach definitely doesn't even attempt to look at energy production or where that energy might be getting lost, we're missing a lot of things, a whole lot of things. We can really
Right.
connect all of our systems just thinking about energy.
I've never heard it put that way, in terms of, like, yeah, where's your energy going? What is your body, using energy for? And it is, like, it's so eye-opening to think of it that we can't just focus on the reproductive system, because, to your point, there's so many interconnected parts. I recently, had done some, like, blood work stuff, because I just was interested to learn more about my own body. And some of the tests indicate, and I haven't been officially diagnosed, so I'm kind of just self-diagnosing at this point, but indicate, some thyroid things, some thyroid issues, some Hashimoto's. ChatGPT is my friend now, because I put all my things in there. Like, what could this be? And it's very indicative of, that thyroid piece. And so that also tells me that there's a lot going on here. And, it's reminding me that all these systems are so interconnected. So I'm going to kind of link this in a weird way, but, I keep seeing updates in news about fertility going down, and that, like, we're not reproducing at the level that we used to, and that this generation's like one of the lowest. I can't remember, but they're just saying like the fertility rate is really low. And so I'm wondering, do you think it's because of that there's these other underlying issues that we're just not focusing on? Is that why we're seeing fertility decline, or what's your stance on that?
Yes, I think as a society or population as a whole, we are uneducated in how to take care of our bodies, which is not our own fault. But I think realizing it at this point and changing how we go about it for our next generations is really going to make a big difference. Um, I know for myself, like education around puberty was very minimal and really meaningless. Okay. Like, okay, this is how you use sanitary pad or tampon,
Yeah.
and, you're going to bleed and, don't have
That's
sex because
sad.
you're going to get pregnant any time
Right.
of the month, and just putting the fear around that and pregnancy prevention essentially. But there's so much more that we can learn and do to support our bodies, and, just girls learning that we shouldn't have symptoms, we shouldn't have pain, like our periods should be easy, and how to listen to our bodies and be in tune with like what those symptoms are trying to tell us, and what we can do with how we're nourishing our body with nutrition and sleep and stress, I think is a game changer. Like, very first step, right? There's a lot more going on, but very first step. And after that, like, I think women, we've kind of been pulled away, I guess, from our intuition, if you will, and living cyclically, we were really biologically designed to do. So, birth control in itself can allow, many doors to open. And I'm not against birth control by any means, but I think like having informed consent and understanding like also how to take care of your fertility while you're using it is really, really important, and part of that education piece that is completely missing when we are going on some form of birth control, so hormonal birth control specifically. There's definitely a lot of layers. I mean, we can talk about our food supply, and
Yeah.
how far away from like real food our food has become, and we can you talk about our stress load and the amount of time that we're in front of screens versus like outside under the sunshine. There's a lot of things that have changed in our modern day that don't work well for our biology and how we're supporting fertility. And I think in our generation, unfortunately, it's all kind of coming to a front. And we're realizing that, a lot of these things that we've added in, are really negatively impacting our reproduction and our population. Therefore, not just the health, but our ability to have babies, which is a really big deal.
Yeah.
So a lot of things layering in there,
Right.
but I would say like just learning more about our bodies very initially, I think is a big way that we can
Yeah.
change the future,
Yeah.
generations.
Yeah, I knew that question could be its own podcast. So
Yeah.
I know this is such a big question when we open the can of, why is our fertility declining? To your point, there's so many factors that contribute to that. But I think, you just mentioned it so well in terms of let's just start with learning more about this vehicle that we're living in and how does it function and having a different appreciation for that. So I guess along with that, and this is kind of a simple question, but I'm just thinking about for somebody who's listening in and they've kind of heard, about fertility and all of this, but maybe they're, just thinking about it now or they're experiencing their own challenges. where do you have someone start? And I know that's another big question, but again, it's like there's so much out there. And to sometimes go into the world of ChatGPT or just Google and you start learning so much, there's a ton. So where do you start guiding people if they do want to start learning more about what's going on for them?
Yeah, if you're not already like tracking your cycle is the very first step. See if you can pinpoint ovulation, and you can explore like ovulation predictor kits, which are the sticks that you pee on to learn more about like if your hormones are rising in a way to predict ovulation. I'm a big fan of using cervical mucus. So the natural mucus that we produce, and we produce more of it at ovulation, which is going to be clear, slippery type, lets you know you're entering your fertile window. The last day that you're seeing that is typically ovulation. And then along with cervical mucus, learning how to track your basal body temperature is really, really insightful as well, because you can confirm that ovulation is happening, but you can also look at that temperature and see how it's trending throughout your entire cycle, which can give you insights to energy production. So if your temperature tends to be below 97.5 on average before ovulation, there's issues with energy production in your body. And you can know that from your basal body temperature. That's when you then want to dive into things like blood testing, and getting even just a basic panel that includes thyroid markers in it can be a helpful start. That basal body temperature is going to give you information on what's happening after ovulation too. And if your temperature is getting high enough for long enough, which is insight to progesterone, really, really important hormone that needs to be produced in order to support implantation and pregnancy as a whole. It's our pregnancy hormone. But it has to be high enough for long enough, which means that it's elevated for at least 9 or 10 days in that cycle or post ovulation timeframe before dropping off. You don't want to see spotting before your full flow, not for days before your full flow anyways. So those are some things that you can pick up from your cycle, noting symptoms throughout your cycle, whether you're getting migraines at a certain time, for instance, or a lot of breast pain or a lot of pain around ovulation or period time. Collecting that data can really help for another provider to be able to help support you and like put together what might be happening or what additional tests are going to be most worthwhile for you. So cycle tracking, blood testing. We can learn a lot from blood testing, looking at cycle day 3 hormones, for instance, FSH, estrogen. Looking at progesterone after ovulation is helpful too. I have a whole preconception checklist on my website that is a really good place to start. It has a really comprehensive blood test or list of blood markers in it to request from your provider, and that can really help you start investigating where to go next. And testing can be a rabbit hole in itself. Most often, I'm ordering testing that's going to do deep dives into things like nutrient status and gut health and those types of things. But that's after having a conversation with you and seeing what you know about your cycle and your health already, because all that testing can get pretty dang expensive too.
Yes. I think those are great places to start. And so, what is a basal body temperature, and where can somebody find a device, or how do we track that?
Yeah. Yeah. So basal body temperature is just like your baseline temperature. You want to test for it the very first thing in the morning, like before you're even getting out of bed, because it's that nighttime kind of rest and repair period that our body goes into that basal or very baseline temperature. So it's going to be most accurate. Once we get up out of bed, we have normal awakening hormones and everything happening that's going to kind of interfere with that accurate temperature. So very first thing in the morning, you can take it manually, just with a thermometer under your tongue. You just want to make sure that that thermometer is reading at least 2 places past the decimal place. You can grab pretty inexpensive ones off Amazon, like Natural Cycles is a really common brand that goes with an app. Or if you want a device, I highly recommend Temp Drop, which is an armband. It's tested for irregular cycles. You put it on, wear it all night, and then you sync it with an app. And that takes a lot of guesswork out of basal body temping, because if you tend to wake up at a different time each morning or have interrupted sleep, the manual temp is not going to be as accurate. So I have a Temp Drop. I've been using it for probably 8 years now, and I've definitely love it for my clients as well.
Are you finding also that when you help clients and yourself heal and explore, this fertility journey and becoming more healthy in that way, that they also end up healing other aspects of themselves? Like, are you seeing that they overall, it's like, oh gosh, I want to just, become pregnant, but then they start working with you and they heal these other pieces of themselves as well? Are you finding that to be a pattern?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when I think about fertility, I think about overall health, because all of our systems are definitely either taking away from fertility or contributing to it. So if we have all sorts of tummy troubles, for instance, you're maybe having 1 or 2 bowel movements a week, which is not what we want to be happening.
Yeah.
Fertility is going to be impacted in a lot of ways because we're not getting the nutrients out of our food that we want. Our hormones are not being eliminated regularly. Like our body's not taking out the trash like it needs to be. And it takes a lot of energy away from fertility. And, that's one example, for instance. And just think about, if you go from having stomach aches pretty much every day, most of your life, to not having those anymore, like that's pretty life changing. And then your energy changes because you're getting more energy out of the food that you're eating. And so you have more energy throughout the day, and your mood changes because you feel better, and you sleep better because all of these things are happening. It's all so connected. It's always like mind blowing to me that other doctors, and especially like fertility doctors, don't put these things together because it's how can it not be connected, right? If our bodies are designed to literally grow a tiny human from scratch, like how can nothing else be impacting that?
Yeah. It drives me crazy as well, which is why I love highlighting conversations like this, especially because I think there's a generation right now that's really hungry for this information, that really actually wants to know more about themselves, but they aren't getting that from, I mean, on the whole, I'm just kind of generalizing here, but they're not getting that, and myself included, from just a traditional doctor who just looks at the basics and says, nothing's wrong with you, off you go, or we're going to fix this one thing by doing just giving you the pill, whatever, easy solution. And so it's really good to highlight, that we can look behind the curtain differently and that it really all is connected. There's a lot, this is kind of a personal question, but there's a lot of fear now, I feel like, around this whole geriatric pregnancy age of being 35 or older. And I am 38. I think I shared that with you. I'm not ashamed. It is kind of one of those things where I start to wonder, how many eggs are even left, or are they all dried up, or what's going on? And so, and I hate the term geriatric, right? And so I'm curious from again, your perspective with this biological clock, really what's the truth behind fertility after the age of 35?
Yeah. So there's age is a factor, but really it's a very minimal factor when we think about all the other factors that we have control over. So unfortunately,
Hmm.
can't control your age, right? But we can take that as information about how we can better support the body and fertility as we do age. Fertility does not drop off a cliff at 35, and whoever decided that, I don't really understand how or why they decided that or why they put that label as geriatric at 35. But um, that probably conversation for another day. And when we think about just aging in general, our natural antioxidant production declines. So we have these processes in our body that are designed to protect our cells, including our follicles or developing eggs, for instance. And as we age, those kind of decline, but there's a ton we can do to support those antioxidant systems. Nutrition is definitely a really big one. So eating more, consuming more antioxidants as a whole. Vitamin C is a major antioxidant that's supportive of fertility. We can supplement them as well. And of course, I always recommend focusing on the foods first and supplements later, but we can utilize supplements very strategically, especially to support fertility as we age. When we talk about antioxidants too, we need to think about where those antioxidants are going. So if we have a lot of like toxic burden or high intake or consumption, rather exposure is a better way to say a high toxin exposure happening, we're going to be using up a lot of antioxidants to protect our body from toxins versus protect our eggs primarily. So
Mm.
the egg quality piece is definitely something we want to be focusing on for everybody, but definitely as we are getting older. So decreasing toxin exposures, things like fragrance, making sure you're not using
Mm.
plastic wherever possible, because these are known chemicals that interfere with egg quality and definitely overload our whole detox system, taking away antioxidants from fertility as well. And in general, we just need to think about stress as a whole. And
Mm.
I know stress can it be kind of like a taboo conversation almost in the fertility world, but it's a really, really important thing to think about because, again, that energy, we lose a lot of energy to stress. And it might not be external stress, but also we have to think about external stress, like our work life and our relationships.
Yeah.
Just what our day to day looks like. Can we slow down and not be so rushed? Like those stressors can make a difference in the overall picture of where your energy is going. If you want it to go to fertility, you have to think about it. And then internal stressors, we can think about blood sugar regulation, for instance. If we're going hours and hours without eating and your body's having to kick in to help you survive by increasing its blood sugar through the stress hormone cortisol, you're losing a lot of energy to a place that you don't want to be losing it, and your fertility is losing out. So, and that, again, like that's important for everybody, but definitely as we age, because our resources change and we need to prioritize even more where that energy is going and where those antioxidants are going. But, and this is a big but, you can have better egg quality at 35 than you did at 25 or at 38 than you did at 28. It's all about your
Really?
exposures and how you're nourishing your body.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. It's so different than what I have heard of or even just have Googled about because, you go down this rabbit hole and it basically gives you the whole 411 of like, if you're this age, you have this much percentage of conception, you have this like probability that I don't know, will that you're fertile or all of the things. And so I'm really glad to hear that you have a different perspective on that and that it sounds to me like it's also quality over quantity. So we're not concerned with how many eggs are left, but really what's the quality of the eggs. Am I catching this correctly?
Yep,
Okay.
exactly. We I mean, as women, we do have that clock, right? We are going to, well, you never actually run out of eggs, but they stop ovulating, they stop maturing essentially. So we can't increase the number that we have left, but the quality is really what it is all about. So say, if we were to put a number on it, if you have 100 cycles left, for instance, you just need one good quality egg.
That's a really good perspective shift. I'm so glad that you brought this up. I just feel like hearing that is super helpful because that, I don't know, I think if we can focus our mind more around that, then we can come at it from the perspective of not being, so fear ridden about this concept and maybe be a little gentler with ourselves too and a little more nourishing. You talked about cortisol as well. This is something I've just kind of learned about too, especially as I'm looking into, if I do have some thyroid things going on, what is the best type of movement I should be doing and stress management. And so I've just really been reading about that. And unfortunately, I've been training for a half marathon, which I realize now running is not probably the best when it comes to cortisol. But, what types of activities or workouts, are supportive of fertility health to you and for most, I would say just kind of on the whole?
Yeah. So moderate intensity zone is kind of what we think of most often. I mean, if you are not having a period, for instance, we really want to audit that exercise as a whole and maybe cut completely out. But otherwise, like if you're cycling, your body's feeling safe enough to ovulate consistently, moderate intensity exercise. And I typically recommend, based on evidence and also experience and practice, strength training as the primary exercise because it has so many additional metabolic benefits. It's supporting hormones in so many additional ways. And muscle is really medicine. And if we can build it, we're not only supporting our current fertility, we're supporting our longevity, how we're going to be going through menopause, and the symptoms that we're going to be experiencing then or throughout that phase of life too. So it's really, really important to have for pregnancy outcomes too. So once you are able to get pregnant, if you have more muscle on, it's just going to make everything easier, as well as decrease risk factors that can come up throughout pregnancy for you and baby too. So muscle is
Yes.
what you want to focus on.
That's great. That's such good advice. And I also want to tag off of that then. Is there kind of a diet? I know it's hard to pinpoint and everyone's so different, so I don't want to pigeonhole anybody into one diet. But, again, on the whole, is there something that people can start focusing on that you kind of in general recommend as a good diet to follow?
Yeah, when that is focusing on good quality animal proteins, I do not, if I was to choose one diet to avoid, it would be vegan, because our animal proteins are so important for getting our vitamins and minerals that we need enough of. So that is definitely something I strongly recommend, including animal proteins, high quality animal proteins, and lots of color. I mean, so it doesn't really have a name, this diet, I would say, but nutrient dense is what you're going for. And our most nutrient dense foods are going to be our animal proteins, our fish and seafood, and as well as our fats. So like our saturated fats, especially, which are like your butter and like animal fats are your friends. They help us create our hormones, and they're really important for follicle development and lining health and all of that. So don't be afraid of things like whole eggs or butter, even full fat dairy. Looking at the quality is always important, but including those things can be really helpful for most women.
This is an interesting topic because there's so much controversy and so many opinions right now about diet. And there's people who are completely on the all protein, all meat diet. And then there's people who are completely the opposite that say plants and vegan is the way. And so I guess I'm interested to hear does your research tell you about this comment that you just made about not going vegan? Why do you say that? So curious.
Yeah. So
And I'm
there's,
not vegan. I'm just curious
yeah.
what it says. Yeah.
um, there is an abundance of research that tells us about the nutrients that support things like egg quality and ovulation consistency and time to pregnancy. And when we think about where we find those nutrients in nature, it's in our animal proteins. So hey, there's not, and everybody wants like a study that shows nutrition research is really complicated in and of
Yeah.
itself because there's so many confounding variables around nutrition, which is why we tend to have a lot of misinformation out there, like red meat is bad or eggs are
Yeah.
bad, and then all of a sudden the narrative shifts and they're like, oh well, that was actually never true. And it's really based on the quality of the research, and
Yeah.
unfortunately often the funding of that research can play a role there too. But if we really strip it back and look at the nutrients, and then think about where those nutrients are found in nature, like nothing says that plants are bad. We still need a lot of plants for a lot of like phytochemicals and food properties and fiber, which is all really, really important. But there is research showing that if we don't get the nutrients that are provided by animal proteins, we run into a lot of negative side effects for fertility and overall health. So we can't say that we need to, or that it's going to be beneficial to cut out animal proteins either. Um, so the balance of both is really where the sweet spot comes in as far as the research goes. And I definitely see that mirrored in practice as well. I have worked with couples that are vegan, excuse me, and then end up working animal foods in, even if it's eggs and seafood and dairy, and we're not really venturing into the meat. We notice really big changes, positive changes in what's happening in the data points that we're collecting, and then they're able to conceive after years of not being able to conceive and carry to term. And similar with vegetarianism, like if I have, and I've worked with numerous women that come vegetarian, but they're really not eating much as far as your eggs or your dairy or your seafood. And if we increase those, we notice really big positive changes too. So you definitely don't have to go full carnivore, and I wouldn't recommend that anyways. But we can't demonize all animal proteins if we want to optimize our fertility.
That's such good information. And I love how you've done the research and then you've also witnessed, from your own experience with your own clients, the success out of that. And so I think that's good for us to all hear that we can balance that and we don't have to demonize some of these foods that we've heard, are cancer causing and this and that. And potentially those studies, maybe there's some merit to them, but you also said high quality. So I think it's important to note that as well, that we're not talking about a Big Mac from McDonald's. We're talking about like a grass-fed, type of meat or a wild caught fish or something.
Yes.
I'm really glad that we've kind of been able to go all over the board, and thank you for letting me kind of just randomly pick your brain. But I want to, I guess I want to ask, for the woman who's maybe listening and just kind of, I don't know, afraid or having some imposter syndrome and has this fear that maybe she's kind of like waited too long and she's just kind of lost some hope. What would you tell her?
There's likely so much hope still. And if you are going to a provider and they're telling you you're too old or IVF is the only answer, please keep looking and get a different perspective, because that is very rarely, very, very rarely the case that IVF is your only answer, or that, you're too old. And even if you're getting results back like your AMH is low, well, okay, that has zero association with natural conception. Okay. So there's definitely a whole another world of information about how we can support where your body is at and really increase your chances. So don't lose hope. I work with women into their 40s, into their mid 40s with great success. And it's all about, diving into where your body is right now. We can peel back the layers and look at, the barriers around energy, and do everything we know, in our power to do to support your fertility. And that can increase your chances a heck of a lot, especially if your male partner's on board too. And we didn't really talk much about that side of the equation, but I see male factor as being a major part of the puzzle in pretty much all of my couples, and they are not addressed in the way that they need to be in a conventional setting. I'm often seeing semen analyses that are way below optimal, even if they're falling into quote unquote normal ranges, and then parameters completely being left off of the testing that we need to know about, and can actually do a heck of a lot to improve sperm quality too. So that 50% of the DNA needs a lot of nourishment and love too, and can greatly change your outcomes and time to conception.
Yeah. It just kind of had me thinking that I feel like there's not actually a lot of research maybe done on that side of things either, of the fertility of men and truly like what's underneath all of that. And of course, this show is for women, but if, a lot of the folks listening in, if you have a male partner, this is something maybe to have, some good conversation around too, because I think a lot of the focus sometimes with fertility is on women, and, that's great. But I think there's another piece to that puzzle too. So thank you for illuminating that. And I'm just glad to have kind of this holistic perspective. Is there any kind of last piece of advice that you would want to offer to women like that from today's call?
Yeah. So I guess as far as a pattern that I'd see is almost like a burnout pattern, unfortunately. Type
This is what I
A,
was
go, go,
thinking.
go
Yep.
women, and you want to know everything and control everything, which I can totally relate to. But there is almost like a disconnect between how you're listening to your intuition. So every symptom is not necessarily to be controlled. It's more of a message that should be listened to, just for a different like kind of perspective or mindset shift around it. We definitely don't want to be like putting band-aids on our symptoms per se, but aiming to like tune in a little bit more and think about what that symptom is actually like trying to tell you. And sometimes we need additional support for that, and that is okay. Like leaning into a different type of support or adding to your support team can go a really long ways for being able to tune in a little bit more. But I would say that working on becoming best friends with your body and really listening to her in a different way versus trying to control her is something that I tend to talk a lot about with my clients. And that in itself can be enough of a mindset shift to kind of allow you to like let go of that, some of that control, and let your body almost process some of the changes or the information or whatever it might be that you are working on. But if you're learning to like listen to her and treat her with respect, like you're going to be repaid from that. And it's okay if that means listening to her and adding to that support team, to get support with how to support what you're seeing and experiencing too. The internet and social media is a wealth of information, but it can't take your individualization into account. We are far from that if we ever get to that point of, chat GPT really being able to individualize things the way like a human can when they can like look at your labs and listen to your story, and help you tweak things that might make a little bit more sense for your specific self.
Yes. Yeah. Gosh, that's so relevant. And that was kind of, I had a feeling that there might be something there around the controlling and like the burnout, and not in a negative way. I just think that that's how, a lot of high achieving women have gotten great results in the past, is you control a lot of your life and you're able to do so much and you're able to be successful and really like just hit the ground running. But I feel like there's this invitation back to ourselves that you kind of just offered as like, kind of come home to yourself, and you can still be high achieving, but maybe in a different way, and having more compassion and, like you said, respect. So I needed to hear that, and I think so many women need to hear that. So thank you for sharing that. So I have a tradition on this podcast that I ask my guests at the end to share a quote or reflection or just something that they feel like leaving for the next guest, not knowing who it is. So I'd love to share what the last guest offered, and then have you share something as well. So the last guest that I interviewed, she left some context before this kind of quote, but she said, "I view the world in a way that as long as I take care of my own life and have my own things in order, and I know my core values and try to live by them, that's all I can really do to make the world a better place." And along with that context, I'm sharing lyrics from the Taylor Swift song Karma. And the quote is, "I keep my side of the street clean. You wouldn't know what I mean." And I liked that. I like that it came with a Taylor Swift lyric. I haven't had that yet. So I think that that's, kind of what you're doing as far as living into your values and helping so many women along that same journey. And so with that, I'd love to give you the opportunity to share something for the next guest, not knowing who it is.
I love that. I would say that you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the future. And I think that is something that I kind of talk about a lot with my clients because of being on really hard, long fertility journeys. We can kind of beat ourselves up like, why didn't we know this sooner? Why didn't I start sooner? But none of that matters, because you can meet your body where you're at right now, and you can definitely change the outcomes for your future.
That is so beautiful and such a good wrap up to everything that we talked about. And just a good, again, mindset shift for all of us, that we don't need to maybe look back and think of what we could have done or should have done or wish would have happened, but we can start today. And I love that. Thank you so much for that and for your time. I just have to say this has been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate how you lead with such groundedness, and you also bring such a wealth of knowledge. And I think that that's where I get, so much value, is from somebody like you who can be compassionate and loving, and also bring this perspective of here's the research and here's the science and here's data that supports this. And so thank you for just sharing some of your wealth of knowledge with us. It is so meaningful to me. So I just really appreciate you, Brooke, and it's just been an honor to get to share time with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation, and I am excited to share it.
Yeah, thank you. Oh my gosh. Thank you for tuning into the show today. And before you go, I just have one quick favor to ask of you. There is a really simple way that you can help support me and help support this show, and that is to hit that follow button on whatever app you're listening to the show on. I'm trying really hard to level up the content and deliver unique value and amazing guests, and just hitting that follow button is the magic that will help continue to empower that. And remember that the world deserves to hear your voice and your stories, and you deserve a place at the top.